Hello students, this is Aman Sharma and today we are going to start class 8 history chapter number 3 ruling the countryside. In this chapter we are basically going to discuss about the revenue system, different types of revenue system and the indigo plantation, and at last we are going to see the blue rebellion. So let's start. Okay, the company becomes the Diwan on 12th of August 1765, means after Battle of Buxar, the Mughal emperor appointed the company, East India Company, as the Diwan of Bengal. Diwan of Bengal means company got right to collect revenue from Bengal. As the Diwan, company becomes the chief financial administrator of the territory under its control. Now, the amount of how much amount of revenue should be collected, how it should be collected, everything goes on into the hands of Britishers, means whole administration. Organizing land resources yield enough revenue to meet growing expenses of the company. So it was one of the objective of the company that how they can increase the revenue and how they can meet the expenses of the company. Type of special precautions companies should have. Actually, the company was an alien power, and it is important to pacify some of the rulers who were ruling in the countryside, that means in villages, those who were having high authority and they were also considered as prestigious. Now, eliminating directly those local powers should cause some type of rebellion against the Britishers. That's why they need to pacify them. Then the revenue for the company. The two main objectives of the company was first to increase the revenue. The steps that they can take to increase the revenue. How can they increase the revenue? And the second objective was to buy fine cotton and silk cloth as cheaply as possible. It is important for them to for more and more profit to buy that cotton or silk clothes in a cheap rate in India, and they can sell it at higher prices in Britain, so they can earn more profit. As we have now discussed that they have got the Diwani right. Company have got the Diwani right. Before that, the company used to import silver and gold from the Britain to meet the expenses of the trade. Now, after Diwani, the revenue collected in Bengal could finance the purchase of goods and export. Two important group of people: one, artisans; second, peasants. The harsh, rigorous things that were happening at that time, that the artisans were forced to sell their goods to the company in low prices. Hence, the artisanal production declined. The production of artisanal goods also declined, and the artisans started deserting their villages as they would have to sell their goods at cheap prices to the company. So they started moving towards the cities for job. Next to that were the peasants. Peasants have to give high amount of revenue, and peasants were not able to pay their dues that were being demanded by the company. So agricultural cultivation also collapsed. So here you can see, lastly, what happened in 1770? A terrible famine killed 10 million people in Bengal, and 10 million people were approximately one third population of Bengal that was wiped out at that time. So the Britishers' revenue was totally declined. Now Britishers needed new revenue. There were three important revenue collection systems that was introduced at that time. The first was permanent settlement. Thus, permanent settlement was basically flourished in territories of Bengal, Odisha, and Bihar. Then, after, Mahal Mehalwari settlement. It flourished in the presidency, Bengal presidency, and most of Uttar Pradesh and Punjab area. Lastly, the Munro system or Rohitwari system, it came in South India. Now, for the income of revenue, as we have seen that artisanal production also declined, cultivation collapsed, and at last in 1770, the famine killed 10 million of people. So here we have seen that most of the revenue that was coming to the company was also declined. Now it is important for the company for the income of revenue to generate the income of revenue, and how they can do that? By two process. First, investment in land had to be encouraged and agriculture had to be improved. So for these purposes, one important policy that is known as permanent settlement was introduced by the company in 1793. This policy came when the Governor General of India was Charles Cornwallis, commonly known as Lord Cornwallis. The permanent in his time, this permanent settlement was first was permanent settlement. In under this permanent settlements, Rajas and Talukdars were recognized as Zamindars. They were asked to collect rent from the peasants and pay revenue to the company. Means between peasants and company there were Zamindars. There were many peasants, and those peasants used to give their rent to the zamindar, and then that zamindar had to pay revenue to the company. The amount was fixed. This was the feature of permanent settlement, that the amount was permanently fixed and it will not increase in future. What was the motive behind introducing permanent settlement? First, a regular flow was built for the company, and second, if the amount to be paid was fixed, that means it will not increase in the future, then zamindars will have sufficient amount of money to invest in improving the land. So these were the motives. Okay, let's discuss some of the problems regarding permanent settlement. What are the problems? The first problem, that zamindars were not interested in improvement of land. Whether they are getting enough amount of money, they are not likely to invest in the improvement of land. The revenue that has been fixed was so high that zamindar found it difficult to pay. In some areas where the peasants were not able to pay revenue to the zamindar or the rent to the zamindar, the the zamindars found it difficult to pay the revenue to the company. Third problem was anyone who failed to pay the revenue lost his zamindaris, were sold off at auction organized by the company. So the zamindari rights were also not secure of the zamindars. The rent to pay for the peasants was high, and his right on the land was insecure. If they were not able to pay the land, then their land were taken away by the zamindars. By 19th century, zamindars' income increased, but no gain for the company. Just imagine if the peasants became prosperous and they are paying sufficient or enough amount of rent to the zamindar. Then the zamindar's income increased, but the company is getting the fixed amount of revenue. So here the company is not gaining money. The next system is Mehalwari system. It was introduced by Holt Mackenzie and came into effect on in 1822. As we have discussed that each presidency was divided into different districts, and the districts were looked after by the collectors. The speciality of this Mehalwari system was that the collectors went from village to village, inspecting the land, measuring the field, then revenue was fixed. That means the revenue, as was fixed in permanent settlement, without seeing the land, without inspecting the land, but in this Mehalwari system, the collectors have to inspect the land, then only they can fix the revenue. Apart from this fixed revenue was not fixed for whole time. It was changed according to the change in land fertility. So the estimated revenue of each plot within a village was added up to calculate the revenue that each village or mahal had to pay. Mahal is a word for village. Now, the revenue of each plot were collected all together, and a approx value was calculated that amount of money had to be paid to the company. The demand was revised periodically, as I told you that it was not fixed as it was fixed in permanent settlement. The charge of collecting revenue was given to village headmen. There was no rajas, no talukdars, no zamindars. The right of collecting the revenue from the village was given to headmen. A special type of revenue system which was actually introduced by Captain Alexander Reid, or started by Captain Alexander Reid in a very small part of land, but it was expanded or flourished by the governor of Madras Presidency from 1819 to 1826, Thomas Munro. Okay, here there is a word, Ryotwari. Ryot, R-Y-O-T. Ryot means peasants, cultivators. No zamindars in the south like north. That was a basic problem, that they can't apply permanent settlement and Mehalwari settlement in South India, because in North India there were zamindars or talukdars, but in South India there was no zamindar. So responsibility of a particular land was of the cultivator. So the settlement had to be made directly with the cultivators, that means the ryots. The land were carefully surveyed before the revenue assessment was done. So company had to collect revenue from each plot of land, and it was only done when it was carefully surveyed. Then after only the revenue was fixed.